Hey guys, this is Joshua Howell. I'm one of the writers here at Victims and Villains. If you don't know what Victims and Villains is, we are a multitude of things. We are a podcast, we're an entertainment website where we host movie reviews and other fun things, and we're also a nonprofit. And through that nonprofit, we share information and resources on suicide prevention and overall mental wellness. So if you haven't been to our website, I urge you to do so. There's a lot of really great things over there. But for the entertainment side of things, I got the opportunity to sit down for a Zoom interview with the directors of Synchronic. Synchronic released back in October of 2020 in the fall, and it's about to release on digital and physical media here in January. And so right after Christmas, I got the chance to connect with those two, and I screened the film, and it was amazing. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. It's among my top 10 films of 2020. And to be honest, I had not heard of these guys beforehand. So I went back and found their 3 previous films, The Resolution, The Endless, and Spring. And I spent my Christmas weekend binging those movies. And I'm so glad I did because they were all fantastic. And it gave me a little more insight to this creative duo, and so I got to sit down with them a couple days after Christmas and chat about Synchronics and some other things, and so we recorded that interview. That's what you're about to see. I will warn you, about 3 or 4 minutes in, something happens with my audio. It was something through Zoom, and because my local mics are just fine. Their audio is perfect, and they do the majority of the speaking, so the interview isn't anything to scrap or whatnot, and you can still understand what I say, but I might even put subtitles on the screen to make it easier. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this interview, and if you haven't seen it, go out and check out Synchronic.
By the way, I can't tell what is behind you, but I'm also really charmed by it because it looks like the way I'd want my bookshelf to be. But what am I looking at? I see the word Hush and DC.
Yeah, this is, I'm a huge Batman fan, so these are like custom bound Batman books that I put together, and they're all like different storylines. So yeah, it's a lot of Batman books.
You put those together yourself. That's why it's that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I know you.
And then those are my books. These are the ones that I wrote. So yeah, smaller part of the bookshelf, but it's growing. It's growing a little bit.
That's so cool.
Thanks.
In my head, I was like, is Hush the really popular, like the most popular run of Bane? But that's not it. Isn't it like the Long Halloween or something?
No. Well, Bane's had a couple. He had Nightfall. That was the big one where he broke. Hush was a fairly newer character, but Long Halloween's a good one too, for sure.
Yeah. Something I think that is so interesting about the Nolan Batman movies that people don't talk about a whole lot is that how much material is heavily inspired from like the best of the pre-existing Batman material. Like you can definitely feel a lot of the Killing Joke in The Dark Knight, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah.
And by the way, one of the greatest comic books of all time, even though Alan Moore wrote it and is not a fan of it.
He's not a fan of most adaptions of his work and stuff like that, so that's not surprising. Well, hey, thanks so much for meeting with me. I really appreciate it. I'm loving the X-Files shirt and all the tats. That's great. It's good stuff.
Thank you. Aaron was applying these for like hours before we got on this.
Yeah,
he's gotten.
Is
really
anyone
good.
really going to notice? And then here you are. Thank you.
Here you are. Okay. Well, I gotta tell you, I saw Synchronic last week. I saw the screener and I absolutely loved it. It's among my top 10 of the year for films. It's really great. And please don't take this as an insult, but I have never heard of you guys before Synchronic. So, but I loved it so much that I did a Benson Moorehead marathon over the weekend and watched Resolution and Endless and Spring. And I just love them all. It's great work, guys.
Oh, thank you. That's really cool. You spent
so
like
much,
8
man.
hours of your damn weekend with us. Thank you. And then
I did. It's a great holiday for me. This is awesome.
Yeah. If you ever want to go deeper, we did a couple movies under pseudonyms. We did a movie called Kill List under the pseudonym Ben Wheatley. We did a movie called Blue Ruin. We did.
We made this one called There Will Be Blood under this goofy thing we did called. He's P, I'm P.
Makes sense. I love those films, especially Blue Ruin. Kill List took me a while to get used to. First time I saw it, I was like, that's just too dark for me. But then I returned to it later and just love it. So yeah, those are good stuff.
How impressive is that though, man? That like a movie can make you go, as a genre fan, a movie can make you go, well, that was just too dark.
Yeah. I've definitely changed my mind on some films, but I loved yours, and I know we got limited time, so I kind of want to get into it. So there's a lot of convoluted time travel films out there. Synchronic felt to me like it was really contained, and like it was such a big concept, but the story was relatively minimalistic. So I wanted to know if you guys were ever tempted to broaden the scope of that, or to like leave room for other stories to be told around that drug, or if this was the only story you wanted to tell.
The conversations were very much, it wasn't, do we want to make this bigger? It was always, how do we make sure this doesn't need to get bigger? And it was two reasons. One was extremely practical. This movie will never have the budget to sustain it being a very large movie unless it's a total rewrite, unless it's completely from the ground up rethought. And the other one is once you make the stakes almost any larger than they are in Synchronic, for example, that Synchronic isn't a designer drug that has a small but basically, if it were like crack, where it was everywhere, it was everywhere in the United States,
right.
Then you have movies that kind of need to have like a scene with the president in it, or something like that. And we don't make those movies. We never wanted to do it. We wanted to be about one person dealing with it. We do like really big backdrops for movies, but everything has to stay really personal. So yeah, we never really wanted to be much bigger. That said, it is a bigger idea than the movie itself is. And there's always a world where it's a TV show or something like that.
Yeah. There's this other thing. It's kind of, I guess it's not that hard to explain, but it's like, I think it's really fun to watch a movie and feel like, well, that could have happened in some corner of the world, and I just didn't hear about it.
Yeah.
And
right.
and it's about, and there's something fun about using whatever narrative devices and storytelling things you can to preserve that within the story. And the bigger your movies get, the more resistance there will always be to that. Because I think it seems that generally commercial is equated with the stakes are the world and all its children. That's that's hyperbole, but it is like, that is the where you end up, and it makes sense. Like that's from a, if you're trying to get everyone to identify with it, then there's probably something to that. But that said, for the person who just turns this movie on, what date does it come out?
January 12th.
January 12th? Yeah. Didn't know anything about it. Like, it would be really cool if you just felt like you watched something that's like, could that have happened? Could there have been like a small run of a synthetic drug that was only in strip mall smoke shops? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of something kind of fun about that.
Well, yeah, that's what I loved about it. I mean, there were choices made in the film that I could see, like a different film being, there's not just one scientist hunting these down. There's like a full corporation, and it's not just in this part of the world. It's in everywhere. And yeah, I thought the stakes were more personable the way you contained it in the story, and I connected with the characters more. And I just really appreciated those choices of keeping it contained like that.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. I also really appreciated, despite the like fantasticness of time travel, as a viewer, I was super tense anytime Steve went back in time. I thought, like, no matter what time period he was going back, his life was always going to be at stake. And I just appreciated that you really made time travel scary, which I don't think a lot of other time travel movies have done. Like, I was tense every time he went back.
That's great. That's really funny, because that was primary goal for us is we realize that outside of a few movies like Time Crimes and such, time travel's treated as wish fulfillment and adventure, and that's just not how we view it on almost any level. We think the act of doing it would be exclusively terrifying. We think that the place that you go back to would be exclusively worse than where you would be leaving, with plenty of exceptions, obviously. But this is talking about as a storyteller. And so for us is, the dread, the cosmic and existential dread that would be caused by uprooting yourself from time and placing yourself in another one. There's almost no fun to be had. And so obviously Anthony Mackie is a man who is dripping with charisma. And so, this movie isn't just a pure downer. But where he goes is almost never a place you would want him to stay.
There's this cut line in the scene where the scene with the chemist, I guess, without getting too far into spoilers, the scene with the chemist and Steve, played by Anthony Mackie. There's a version of that scene where the chemist talks about what happened to essentially his business partner, chemist's business partner. And he pulls out a picture and he's like, "This is him," and he has smallpox. And he's like, he basically went off somewhere to dispose of himself so he wouldn't spread an eradicated disease. And I think that when you think about things like would it be fun to go be in a costume drama era during Elizabethan England or whatever? It's yeah, it'd be fun, but it's not fun not having antibiotics. Or
or being anyone but the very small percentage of the population that gets to wear those cool costumes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone else is literally wearing rags that they're like, oh, well, maybe we're taking our monthly bath, but the water will only be hot for a little bit, and my other 4 siblings have to go first,
and 3 of them are cholera.
I'll be bathing in the cold, muddy cholera water once a month, and that's most of everyone. It's pretty much everyone. Geez, actually, just go back. I mean, even Elizabethan or Victorian society or something like that. I mean, it's probably. I'll bet people smell pretty bad.
Also let's talk about those bar conversations, right? You go into a bar and I go in there, run into my buddy Aaron. Hey, how's Joey? Died of consumption. Oh my God. How's Maria? Smallpox. It's not. I don't know. Now that said, that might be a really fun night in the pub. Yeah, the ale might be really good.
Yeah. But you can just go to medieval times. They serve beer, so you could just
exactly.
You could fake it.
It's a safer environment, medieval times. So yeah. I agree. The film's based in New Orleans, and Steve learns that the drug, depending on where he's standing in the room or where he's at, can take him back to different times. So were there other time periods or scenarios that did make the cut? Did you ever think of him going into the future, since the whole, experiencing time all at once? Or were these always the ones that you wanted, from the beginning?
No, there were some that were overly ambitious and arguably silly in early drafts, but I just want to tee it up for Aaron. Did you know, and then you can talk about the scene. So we were going to be the first ones to show dinosaurs as looking like chickens.
Yes. We're gonna make cool dinosaurs, and let's talk about how ridiculous that is for 2 reasons. One is, on a indie movie budget, you're going to do Jurassic Park. You think that's going to be good? You think that's going to somehow turn out better than Steven Spielberg was able to do it? There's that, and then also ultimately the scene was Steve goes back in the past and he gets chased around with a dinosaur. Like, wow, that's really emotional. That's an awesome scene. And no one will remember anything from that scene besides there was a cheap indie film dinosaur that just chased Anthony Mackie around, and Anthony would be on set with us and be like, "You guys better not screw this up," and we'd be like, "We will."
Nice.
Luckily we're decent enough filmmakers to know that you actually need money for some things.
We also learned what you can't afford in this budget range of indie film. And one of the things was there was a scene where he would appear underwater. And that is extraordinarily complicated. to do than any film budget. And I don't know if you saw it. Have you seen The Endless, the movie we did before this one?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's a scene in The Endless where my character jumps into a lake, Aaron's in the boat, and we just ran and we just shot that because it was a no budget movie, and we just did it. You could probably guess about how we did that scene. If you try to do a scene like that at the budget range we were working at, it was like, well, you're gonna have to have 2 scuba divers, 4 boats, 5 stuntmen. It was like all these things, and pretty soon
you have to dredge the lake so that you can stand on it at any time. So if somebody starts drowning, they can just stand. Literally, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. This is what had to happen.
And also, the other issue is like, there's not a lot of places with standing water where the water like just qualifies as even being clean enough to put your talent in. And that's no joke. I mean, we're not complaining about that. Luckily, in the case of The Endless, I was perfectly willing to jump into E. coli water.
Poop water. Just didn't want to put Anthony in the poop water, but I was like, Justin, get in the poop water.
So was it always, going back in time? Did you ever consider going forwards in time?
There were a bunch of reasons. Well, here's one thing I'll say is there's no telling, especially with the ravages of potential wars and climate change, if you haven't seen the future in Synchronic. However,
I guess that's true. That's
right,
true.
especially the opening stuff, the stuff that happens in the opening. However, with a less cheeky answer, there's a whole bunch of reasons why not. One is just level of complication. 2 is there's an actual philosophy of time, of just that the past is set and the present is set, but the future is still to be determined. And so we went with that one. So in order to be consistent, we don't go to the future. And then one of the other things is just, as we were talking about in the very beginning of this interview, is we want it to be scary. And the future can be scary, but it requires a lot. It doesn't have an eldritch quality to it yet. And we're already doing so much with the movie. We feel like to build a frightening future, it'll take the whole movie. We could be wrong, but that's where we were feeling at that time.
That makes sense.
It's like,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I guess I go actually with some of what you say. Maybe it's a good way of putting it. It's like, it's easier to make The Witch scary than it is to make Blade Runner scary.
Sure.
Like, it's just like these things, it doesn't immediately jump at you as being like, oh, that's terrifying. All that technology and all those robots. It's cool.
And it can be done.
It can be, for sure. Absolutely. I had this thought the other day, Aaron, I didn't tell you about.
You didn't tell me about one of your thoughts?
Yeah, I forgot about this one. But it's probably really stupid, but I was thinking about how, like, because Synchronic is a time travel movie, you need characters to refer to things being like, I went to the past, or I did this thing. But that very phrase kind of contradicts our premise in certain ways, because what we're saying is it's block state universe, and it's more like everything's happened simultaneously, or layers of a tree, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, how would you actually express that to a viewer without, having people say things like, I'm going back or I'm going forward, even though you're also saying you can't go back or forward. And I was like, oh, well, what you do is you would have to you'd print out every frame of the movie and put it on a 3-dimensional wall and have your viewers stare at it.
Oh, that works great.
That's a one. and then you would be representing. You would have a closer representation of the science fiction within the movie, but it would be only something that was in the Museum of Contemporary Art. If that, I mean, that's ambitious. So I wouldn't even make it. So
okay, so speaking of The Endless, I really did love The Endless. But after watching this one, so The Endless was like 1 hour and 56 minutes, and Synchronic is 13 minutes shorter than that. But when I got done with The Endless, I was certain that it was like a 2.5 hour movie, because the pacing was like so incredibly different. That wasn't a bad thing, but I just felt like, the Synchronic had like this constant sense of urgency, where The Endless felt like a slow, like unnerving approach. And I wondered how intentional the pacing and the editing was for Synchronic to just kind of push that urgency.
That's a cool question, actually, because there was a version of Synchronic that was so extreme in the direction of what you felt when you watched it. Like the idea that it's like, oh, yeah, The Endless is like an unsettling, slow burn horror, but not, it's weird because it's not like House of the Devil slow burn, where,
Right.
And by the way, House of the Devil is awesome. But those are, I don't think, it's like, if you call House of the Devil slow burn, you almost can't call The Endless slow burn if you're comparing those things.
Right.
But the thing you're detecting about Synchronic feeling like, oh, it moves at a quicker pace than our other films. Again, there was this version that was like so extremely in that direction that it just wasn't an emotional experience at all. And we tried to bring it back into feeling more like an emotional experience, putting back in some scenes that had been cut for pacing, figuring out a way to structure it to where we could put those scenes back in, and literally like making shots longer.
just not cutting if we can avoid it. Yeah, it was one of the more interesting lessons as a filmmaker, because this was the one where we really put this idea to the test, where there's this phrase, kill your darlings, which is, you even if you love it, if it doesn't belong, get rid of it, right? And we applied that to an extreme to one edit of Synchronic. And it's really weird because pacing notes, like you show it to your friends and people that you trust, and a lot of times filmmakers, so they know how to like speak the language of what's wrong, that you can kind of like really dissect it. And the pacing problems just completely went away. But what's weird is it's got this, the thing that we didn't quite recognize, and it took us a little while to figure out, is that we weren't getting the note of, hey, this moves too slowly or anything like that. But we also weren't getting feedback like, this movie really affected me. I'm really going to be thinking about this for a long time. Like those things like that. They'll say a bunch of nice stuff, but it won't have, you won't realize that you're missing the feedback that you need to say like, this is done. So, to hear like your movie moves at a good clip sounds great, but there's also this other chasm that you need to be able to listen for. And luckily, I do believe that at least to a degree we figured that out, but it was interesting in the process of creation to know that there was a missing note, but you don't know how to ask for it, till you've already experienced it missing.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the movie where we discovered that it's better to have people say, the movie felt a little slow and I cried at the end, than have people say, it's great pacing.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
I oftentimes wonder if a film school teacher has ever had to tell their students, like, you cut too much out. It's a tough thing because you're always like, we're film people, human beings, filmmakers. You're always coming in too long, and you always have to like reel yourself in. That's all part of the process. But I've never seen anyone else in the situation where someone's like, you cut too much out. But it's like a good lesson to learn, and it's very. Do you ever have anyone in film school say like you cut too much out?
No. But also, I mean, I don't think anybody even knows what they cut out. Like,
But I thought the film was great balance. I carried a lot of weight, and I really, really enjoyed it. So the pacing thing was just the urgency thing, but I didn't think it was too short or too long.
It's one of our favorite things to talk about with Synchronic because it was such a process we went through.
I can imagine.
Normally, pacing is something that you just kind of deal with it. You get these notes, you do this, you pull that, and you land there. Synchronic, like the pacing of the movie, was the whole like revolution for us when it comes to finding what we wanted the movie to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm reviewing this film on behalf of Victims and Villains, and we're a podcast. We review films. We attend Comic-Cons, but we're also a nonprofit that we provide resources and promote awareness on suicide prevention and mental wellness. And so both of your main characters are presented with dire circumstances in this film, and on top of that, they're already paramedics, so I'm sure they see horrible shit on a regular basis. And I really liked how, even though they were presented as longtime friends, it kind of seemed like Dennis kind of assumed that Steve was living this high life as a bachelor, and Dennis came off like he was kind of stuck in his life, and he envied his friend's freedom, even though he didn't know like the personal chaos that Steve was dealing with. And I kind of thought that you conveyed that in some of your cinematography techniques. Like, it seemed like things were more chaotic when it was just on Steve, and it might have been a little smoother or more in place when it was on Dennis. And am I assuming that right? And did you do other things to convey that?
Yeah, you're dead on. And actually, are originally they're a good way to put it. The lighting on set, the lighting pre-grade reflected more of what you're talking about. We just slightly, but we just hit issues with, like, it's one of those things where it's like, so many things are good ideas and you should totally do them, but you just got to modulate them back a little bit once you start getting feedback from people. But it's really cool that you saw that. And another really interesting thing along those lines was we wanted all of his travels into the past to feel really verite and handheld and all that. And
if we had a bigger budget, his 7 minutes into the past every time would have been one unbroken 7 minute long shot. We just didn't have the budget for it. But that would have been and it would have been, our operator would have the camera on his shoulder and they would chase him around until the sequence was over. That's how we would have done it. But unfortunately, it's crazy. Indie films don't have much money. So
here's something we've never talked about with their relationship before, actually, that I've only learned since I've seen feedback to the movie, was that, like, while I think that we wouldn't have made that dynamic if we didn't find it interesting and emotionally engaging, all those things, and love it. And I love the performance out of those guys. But I've had people point out that it's like, oh, it's so similar to the dynamic in Lethal Weapon that it feels overly familiar to people. But here's the weird thing. I have no memory of Lethal Weapon.
I've never seen it. I'm living this right now.
And it's a very interesting thing where it's like, that's a gigantic, I think that's probably one of, like, the highest, early 90s. It's probably like one of the highest gross movies in the 90s, I think. Who's the writer of it? He's the guy, Shane Black. It's like one of those, like, superstar spec script things that sold $1 gazillion when that used to happen. But yeah, no, I've heard that recently, and I just think it's really interesting. You don't want anyone to, you don't want the subtext to be like, you're a total hack. That sucks. But I also don't think that that's the case at all. But I do think it's very interesting how, like, from a totally different tonal perspective and like making, like, a no budget indie film, you can kind of, like, land on these things that are familiar from, like, much more commercial films.
I'm writing Watch Lethal Weapon on my to-do list because I realized I've never seen it. I should. So
well, Richard Donner just announced he wanted to come back for Lethal Weapon 5 to direct. So you definitely have some catching up to do, for sure.
Just found out there's 4 of them. That's crazy.
There you go. So I know my time's coming up here. I think I got a few other questions, but we'll go with this one. In a typical year, personally, I'd be hitting up Comic-Cons and book fairs with my books and comics, and I use New York Comic-Con as, like, my yearly goalpost to complete a new book. And 2020 has basically canceled all of those events, at least for me, and it's been a trying year on everybody for different reasons. So I wondered, how did you two deal with 2020? Did it impact your creativity or your work ethic or your projects?
I'll just very briefly tee up something I realized the other day, and you probably realized it too, was we're very fortunate in many, many, many ways, but professionally, one of the ways we were fortunate was, very oddly, our output was really high during COVID. And it was, like, just circumstances. Some of that was like, well, we know how to go kind of make just coming up the way we make films, that we were still able to work on stuff and do it. And then some of that's just because of the cycle of, like, whether, it was some stuff finished up on Synchronic or writing something or whatever it was, TV gigs that were able, big enough budget stuff that was still shooting and could do it safely. And then also ourselves being able to be like, okay, our producer became a COVID safety officer, and we figured out some ways to do some smaller productions, and so we were like very, very, very lucky in that way. And the last thing I'll say about it is one thing that is really sad, though, that I think that we're all going to mourn the loss of is we're not going to have these really great, like $500,000 indie films for a while. You know, actually, we started talking about Kill List, right? Like we won't have movies like that for a while because you either got to go way lower or way higher in budget.
Yeah,
and that's sad.
Yeah,
we kind of just lived through a golden age of all those. And,
Well, I've loved talking to you guys. I did wonder. I mean, you guys have been directing now for almost a decade together. You know, I love it when I find a partner that I really vibe with and collaborate well with. After all this time, do you guys still challenge each other? Do you butt heads at all, or are you just in that perfect sync?
like the best way to probably put it is, and I don't mean this as a cop out. Filmmaking, no matter what, is a super collaborative effort in almost any form it takes, even if you're doing the tiniest movie. And I think that, like, if you can think about it that way, that sort of unravels the mystery of like how a co-directorship works. If also, you probably need to be two relatively even keeled human beings. Are emotional, but like if either one of us had a gigantic temper, it probably, I don't know. I've heard those things work. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard producers and directors like scream at each other. Like Klaus Kinski and Werner Herzog. But yeah, no, it's a really smooth, wonderful process. Challenging each other doesn't take any kind of a negative form, pretty much at all. Almost always when someone comes up with a really interesting idea, it goes on trial. And you find out what happens after the jury deliberation, you know?
Yeah.
Nice.
And like,
nice.
and like sometimes it's funny too, because like sometimes we have a boss we have to pitch stuff to,
yeah,
you know? And it's like, what if we get to be in constant like routines of doing that and keeping those brain muscles like conditioned for that, and in a way that, you know, you might not have to. Well, actually, we probably kind of take the place of like a producer. We'd have to. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like a
Not that, but by the way, not that our producer also doesn't weigh in on stuff. But that just works really well too. He actually sent us a picture of his baby while we were on this.
Nice. Well, I think my time is up, and I don't want to.
No. I want to do it. I'm the enforcer. Okay, your time is up. Okay.
All right. Cut it off. You got it. Good job. You did it. Thank you so much for joining me. You made my night, and you made my weekend, man. I mean, I saw the trailer for Synchronic, and I knew I really wanted to watch it, but I didn't know it would lead me to watch like 4 other films in 3 days that I would just really appreciate. So, or 3 other films rather. So, I can't wait for your next stuff.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care. Have a good night.
Thanks, Josh.
See ya.
All right, so that was my interview with Justin Benson and Aaron Moorehead. It was too short. 30 minutes flies by when you're having a really good conversation. They're great. They are just amazing directors. They're a creative team that I'm very intrigued by, and I can't wait to see what else they come up with. Apparently, they even directed an episode of Twilight Zone that I haven't checked out yet, so I'm going to go check that out. As a sci-fi writer myself, and a fan of indie projects in general, whether those are books or comics or movies, I really appreciated the chance to sit down with these guys. So thank you, Justin and Aaron, for letting me interview you, and thank you to everybody here for checking out this video. Again, if you haven't checked out our website, go check out Victims and Villains. We also have a Patreon if you want to support our efforts going forward. So thank you again for watching, and have a good one.